You know how sometimes you just want to get the real story on what's coming, but without wading through, like, mountains of data?
Yeah, absolutely. Cut through the noise.
Exactly. Well, you sent over some really interesting material, and today that's what we're doing. A deep dive into what the world might actually look like around 2030.
Based on those sources, yeah, we're
Oh,
trying to pull
man.
out the key trends, the big shifts.
Right. Focusing on those insights that give you, the listener, a real handle on the near future.
Precisely. We'll be looking at how populations are changing, technology's relentless march, and, the economic shifts outlined in this material.
It sounds like it covers both the challenges and, maybe more excitingly, the opportunities ahead.
Definitely. It paints a picture of what's coming.
And this source, the Guillen PDF, it feels pretty grounded, like it's looking at trends already in motion.
It does. It's not just pulling ideas out of thin air. It's analyzing observable shifts.
So our mission here is to extract those crucial bits, the moments off, to make things clearer for you. Okay, so where do we even start? There's so much changing.
Well, it probably makes sense to start with the most fundamental thing, people.
Yeah.
The demographic changes highlighted are, honestly, transformative.
Okay, people. Demographics. What's the big picture there?
We're seeing this really significant divergence in birth rates across the world.
Right, that jumped out at me too. It's like starkly different. You've got declining births in places like East Asia, Europe, the Americas.
Yeah, well, in Africa, the Middle East, South Asia,
Yeah.
the decline is much slower, or growth is still strong.
And the statistic was pretty wild. For every one baby in developed countries, there are more than 9 born elsewhere.
Over 9, yeah.
Yeah.
In emerging markets and the developing world, it really shows the scale of the shift.
So what does that mean, though, for things like, I don't know, talent pools, consumer markets? Is this a big power shift brewing?
That's exactly the question. And it gets even clearer when you look country by country. For every U.S. baby, it's about 4.4 in China, 6.5 in India, and get this, 10.2 in Africa.
Wow. 10.2, that's huge.
It really is. It signals this fundamental rebalancing of where the world's population and likely its economic gravity will be.
Okay, but it's not just birth rates, is it? I saw something about people living longer, too.
Yes, that's another crucial piece. Especially in developing countries, life expectancy is rising fast.
So the gap between the richest and poorest countries is shrinking.
Significantly. It used to be a 30-year difference back in the 50s. Now it's down to around 17 years.
What's driving that? Better healthcare.
Primarily, yeah. Advancements in healthcare, sanitation, access to better food.
Yeah.
It's making a massive difference.
And the mortality rates you mentioned for Africa.
A huge drop. Between 1950 and 2015, mortality fell by 65% in Africa. Compare that to just 3% in Europe over the same time.
So more people are surviving into adulthood, contributing to that population growth.
Exactly. Which brings us to what the source calls the African baby boom.
Right, the projections are kind of mind-boggling. Sub-Saharan Africa goes from, 1.3 billion now?
To potentially 2 billion by 2038 and maybe 3 billion by 2061.
That's a massive transformation for the continent. And the source mentioned this growth is happening despite huge past challenges like AIDS.
Yes, it highlights the resilience, the underlying demographic momentum. Even devastating events didn't stop the long-term trajectory.
It also pushes back on some common ideas, doesn't it? Like the idea Africa's getting overcrowded.
It does. The material points out that Asia's population density is currently 3 times higher, and Europe's is 4 times higher than Africa's.
So the density narrative might be a bit simplistic. There will be challenges, obviously, but maybe not that specific one in the way people think.
Precisely, and this growth also presents massive opportunities. The source talks about a potential demographic dividend.
Okay, demographic dividend.
Okay.
That's when you have a larger working age population relative to dependents, right? Sparking growth.
Exactly. And the source suggests this could really spur improvements in key areas, particularly agriculture in Africa.
How does that connection work? More people means more demand for food, which drives innovation.
That's the idea, incentivizing more efficient farming. And the source really focuses on cassava as a key crop here.
Cassava. I know it as, like, a root vegetable. Yucca.
Yeah, it's incredibly hardy, drought-tolerant, flexible harvest times. Plus, cultivating it often needs manual labor, providing local income.
But the source said it's more than just food, right? Industrial uses.
Absolutely. It's a staple food, sure, and a gluten-free thing globally now. But it can also go into plywood binders,
Yeah?
pharmaceutical fillers, even biofuel. Super versatile.
Wow, okay. And there were examples of people driving this.
Yes, farmer entrepreneurs like Celestina Mumba in Zambia teaching better cultivation methods, and Pastor Felix Afolabi in Nigeria pushing for mechanization. They're harnessing these shifts.
So this population growth, it's not just a challenge. It could actually be an engine for innovation and growth, especially in agriculture. Okay, let's pivot a bit. Immigration. That's another hot topic the source dives into.
It is, and the analysis really challenges some, common fears.
The idea that immigrants take jobs away from locals.
Exactly, or that they're a drain on resources. The research cited paints a rather different picture.
What stood out to me was the point about which jobs immigrants compete for. It said they often have either low skills or very high skills.
That's the finding. The theory is people with solid mid-level skills often have good opportunities at home. So those who emigrate often fill gaps at the lower end, agriculture, hospitality, or the very high end, like tech and medicine.
They're not necessarily competing directly with native-born workers who have those intermediate skills.
Right. And the source suggests those mid-level jobs are actually more threatened by automation anyway.
Ah, okay. Because it's more cost-effective for companies in wealthier countries to automate those tasks rather than pay higher wages.
That seems to be the logic. And restricting visas for, say, highly skilled scientists can actually backfire, pushing R&D elsewhere. China, India, Canada.
And the contribution to innovation seems pretty clear. Almost 40% of U.S. Nobel Science winners since 2000 were foreign-born. That's striking.
It really is. And the National Academies concluded immigration has a net positive economic effect in the U.S. It helps offset an aging workforce,
Right.
can lower prices for some services, and even boost the housing market through demand.
But the source also talked about framing, how the way we talk about immigration shapes opinions.
Hugely important. Theo Wigg's research showed people are more sensitive to potential costs of immigration than potential benefits. Loss aversion.
That feeling of losing our way of life taps into that bias, doesn't it? That's what Sirowicki argued.
Precisely. Fear of loss is a powerful motivator in that rhetoric.
But there's a counter-narrative, something about brain circulation.
Yes, instead of just brain drain. Annalise Saxenian's idea. It suggests migration isn't a one-way loss for the home country.
Sure.
People gain skills abroad, send money back, invest, maybe even return with new expertise. It can become a beneficial exchange for both countries.
So a much more nuanced view is needed as we look towards 2030. Okay, let's transition again. The aging population, the gray market.
Yeah, and what's fascinating here is how our ideas of old are shifting. Technology is set to change retirement, geriatric care.
We need to imagine older people being active and productive for much longer.
Exactly. And the economic clout is just enormous. The over 60 group controlling, $15 trillion in annual spending?
15 trillion. That's a market you can't ignore.
Absolutely not. So huge opportunities in healthcare, home care, assisted living, but also leisure, entertainment, quality of life stuff tailored for seniors.
Like the example of shoes, designing them for comfort and ease of use, but still stylish.
Small things, big market. And businesses need to adapt. The source mentioned retailers changing hours, offering discounts, having seating, training staff.
Right. What about online versus physical stores for seniors?
It's evolving. They're increasingly online using Amazon, researching purchases, but they might still value that local store interaction too. So maybe it's a mix. E-commerce and physical stores complementing each other.
And technology is specifically targeting this group too. Philips shifting to healthcare tech.
Big strategic move, yeah.
Yeah.
Recognizing that huge growth potential. And startups like Rendeavor using VR.
Oh, yeah, the virtual reality for elder care to combat isolation.
Exactly. Providing shared experiences for people with limited mobility. It's quite innovative.
And Japan's robotics, the Toyota, support robots. Pero the seal.
Japan's really leading the way, driven by their own aging demographics. Pero's interest in maybe avoiding that uncanny valley problem helps.
Good point. And we can't forget who's doing a lot of the hands-on care, can we?
Crucial point, immigrants. In the U.S. and many other developed countries, something like 90% of paid senior care is done by foreign-born workers.
90%, wow. Then there's the gray labor market concept.
Yeah, the idea that we're wasting the talent and experience of older generations. Intergenerational teams, like BMW found, can actually be more creative and better at problem solving.
Like in that movie, The Intern.
Exactly. A lighthearted take, but it makes the point. Combining experience and fresh perspectives is powerful.
So the aging population isn't just a problem, it's a huge market and a source of talent we need to rethink. Okay, let's switch gears to another generation, millennials.
Right, and they get stereotyped a lot, don't they? Like being compulsive job hoppers.
But the source says that's not really accurate. They stay longer than Gen X did.
Apparently so.
Yeah.
But they do seem to prioritize finding work that feels meaningful, more so perhaps than previous generations.
They face some serious financial headwinds, though, right? Student debt, housing costs.
Definitely. Lower savings rates overall compared to their parents at the same age. Student debt is a huge factor for many, making things like buying a home much harder.
Though some have managed to save impressively with the source notes.
True, it's not uniform, but the overall trend is towards more financial pressure.
And the actual makeup of the younger generation is changing dramatically, too. More diversity.
Hugely. In the U.S. and Europe, by 2030, the groups we currently call minorities are projected to be the majority among young people. A profound shift.
Interesting contrast with China, too. The big divide in the U.S. seems to be socioeconomic status among millennials.
Whereas in China, it's more urban versus rural, and urban Chinese millennials are apparently even more plugged in digitally, more into online shopping than Americans.
And they save more.
Higher savings rates, yes,
Yeah.
which might relate to different social safety nets or cultural factors.
Their digital savviness might help them stay connected as they age, maybe avoid isolation.
That's a possibility the source raises. And there are positive trends. Less smoking, more exercise, higher education levels than previous generations.
But the financial insecurity cloud hangs over a lot of them.
It does. That's a key challenge for this generation.
Okay, let's zoom out globally again. The rise of the new middle class, especially in emerging markets, this feels like a really fundamental economic shift.
It absolutely is. By 2030, the source projects China and India will be the world's two biggest consumer markets. Think about that.
That changes everything for global brands, doesn't it? They have to cater to the Sings, the Wangs, the Mwangis.
Exactly. Their preferences, their aspirations, and we're already seeing the rise of strong local brands too, like the Brand Africa findings showed.
And this new money middle class, they're maybe more aspirational than the old middle class in developed countries.
That's the characterization. More upwardly mobile compared to the stagnation felt by many in the West.
We're seeing innovation shift too, right? Patent applications soaring in China and India.
Yeah, a huge surge compared to the U.S. It signals a real shift in where new ideas and technologies are coming from.
While at the same time, the traditional middle class in places like the U.S. is shrinking.
Pew Research found lower and upper income households now outnumber the middle, and it's harder for younger people to reach that middle class status. Having kids, interestingly, makes it even harder financially.
It seems Western companies have sometimes stumbled entering these new markets, like eBay in China, Walmart in Brazil.
The big time. Lack of understanding of local tastes, culture, competition. You can't just replicate a Western model and expect it to work everywhere.
But this huge expansion of consumption, it raises that sustainability question again, doesn't it?
Massively. Can the planet support billions consuming like the average American? The resource demand, especially for things like meat.
Beef production's water footprint is huge.
Exactly. It poses enormous environmental challenges. We'll need innovation, maybe different consumption patterns entirely.
Okay, another huge transformation. Women's evolving roles.
Absolutely fundamental. Women's growing economic power and influence are reshaping everything, from finance to corporate culture to innovation.
They invest differently, bring different perspectives. Plus, they live longer, which has economic consequences too.
Right. The source noted a trend towards women preferring index funds, maybe indicating a different risk appetite or investment horizon. And as they control more wealth, companies have to understand their preferences.
And women entrepreneurs are getting recognized as key economic drivers.
Policymakers see it. Helen Clark's quote about unlocking their potential. And we see examples like Isabel Roa in Chile.
But they face more barriers, right? Especially in getting funding.
Yes, that discrimination still exists, even if motivations are similar across genders.
And the whole work-life balance thing,
Oh.
still a major struggle.
Huge pressure, especially combining motherhood and careers. Many women working full-time out of necessity really highlights that.
And this pressure, the workplace stress, it's affecting women's health, narrowing the longevity gap.
That's what the source suggests. Increased exposure to man-made diseases, as it puts it.
Plus, the wage gap is still stubbornly there.
Depressingly so. Significant gaps persist across developed countries, even for similar work. Progress is slow.
And leadership. More women managers, but still few at the very top.
Yeah, underrepresented in private sector leadership. The source mentions the bossy label, Cantor's theory on token women facing unique hurdles. Even leaders like Thatcher and Merkel face constant gendered scrutiny.
So progress, yes, but still a long way to go for real parity. Okay, let's look at cities and sustainability. Big challenges there.
Especially climate change impacting coastal cities. Rising sea levels are a huge threat, particularly in Asia, Jakarta, Manila, but also places like New Orleans.
And within cities, that stark inequality, growth and poverty right next door, like the Washington, D.C. example.
A reminder that progress isn't evenly shared. Addressing those urban disparities is critical.
I liked Daniel Chambliss's idea of ordinary success, just consistently doing the small things right, applied to the environment.
Yeah, like nudging people.
Hmm.
Putting the cost of heating on the thermostat might make you turn it down a notch. Small behavior changes add up.
Water scarcity is another massive urban challenge looming, isn't it?
Huge. By 2030, the UN thinks nearly half the world's population will face serious water shortages, especially fast-growing cities in Asia and the Middle East.
We need solutions like that Wello water wheel idea, simple, effective ways to access water.
Exactly. And things like vertical agriculture in cities.
Growing food indoors,
Mm-hmm.
in places like Detroit.
Yeah. Reduces transport emissions, uses less water, potentially, provides fresh food locally. Could revitalize some areas.
And Richard Florida's creative class idea. Talent, tolerance, technology, making cities vibrant.
Plus that street-level culture.
Yeah.
But even dynamic cities struggle with inequality. It's a constant tension.
Okay, underpinning so much of this is technology. Let's dive into that.
Schumpeter's creative destruction comes up. New tech displacing old. It's the engine of the market economy, but it can be painful.
Like the future of work concerns. AI, automation. Truck drivers getting replaced by autonomous vehicles.
That's a major potential disruption. Millions of jobs. And it raises deep ethical questions too, doesn't it? AI making life or death calls.
The need for moral algorithms. A global conversation we probably need to have, like, yesterday.
Absolutely. On a different note, 3D printing potential upsides there.
Environmentally, maybe? Less waste, less shipping? Transforming manufacturing?
Potential for both, yeah. Democratizing production, making things on demand, even in remote places. But also job displacement in some trades, IP issues.
It's interesting about physical books holding their own against ebooks in developed countries.
Yeah, the tactile thing, how we absorb info. But ebooks are huge for access in developing countries, right? Initiatives like Snaplify, WorldReader.
Good point. Getting content where physical books are scarce, and old tech finding new uses, like the flywheel example.
Shows that innovation isn't always brand new. Sometimes it's reinventing the old.
Okay, the sharing economy. That's huge now.
And adopted differently across the world, the source notes. More uptake among millennials in Asia Pacific, Middle East, Africa.
It really challenges old ideas about ownership, doesn't it? Especially for younger people.
Fundamentally, driven by network effects, more users make it better for everyone, like Airbnb or Uber.
And pushed by economic pressures, too. Stagnant wages, inequality makes sharing more appealing.
That seems to be part of it. Plus, maybe a preference for collaborative consumption.
But it's kind of the Wild West, regulation-wise.
Largely, yeah. Lots of debate, lots of challenges for cities and governments, benefits like income for providers, convenience for users.
But downsides, too. Congestion, rising rents, the tragedy of the digital commons.
That's the argument. Is it just monetizing everything?
Mm.
But then Elinor Ostrom's work offers hope.
Right, that communities can self-organize to manage shared resources effectively.
Exactly. With clear rules, monitoring, ways to resolve conflict, it suggests cooperation is possible, maybe a cultural shift towards enjoying and experiencing rather than just owning.
Interesting. Okay, nearly there. The future of money itself.
Foundational point. Money is built on trust. Whatever comes next has to maintain that.
And the U.S. dollar's dominance might be challenged by 2030.
The source suggests will be questioned, yeah. And blockchain comes up, obviously.
But not just for crypto. Other uses.
Big time. Supply chain transparency, verifying ethical sourcing, like for diamonds, creating payment systems for the unbanked, like the Gates Foundation project, could cut out a lot of paperwork and intermediaries.
But for crypto itself to really take off, what's the key?
The source suggests it needs to offer tangible benefits beyond just replacing cash. Maybe incentivizing good behavior, like rewarding resource saving or lower carbon footprints.
Link digital money to positive actions.
That's a fascinating idea. Okay, so wrapping up, how do we adapt to all this change?
Embrace uncertainty seems key. Faulkner's quote, "You cannot swim for new horizons until you have courage to lose sight of the shore."
Be willing to let go of the familiar and maybe start small, like Apple's incremental innovation.
Small, iterative changes are often more effective than trying for massive, risky breakthroughs. And keeping options open, staying flexible.
Don't bet everything on one future scenario, basically.
Exactly. And learn from the past. Even Rapa Nui, Easter Island. It's seen as a collapse story, but also one of adaptation, changing governance to cope with scarcity.
So there's hope in human ingenuity and resilience.
That seems to be the underlying message. Embrace the change, seize the opportunities. Okay, so a quick recap. We've hit massive demographic shifts. The changing global middle class, the rising influence of women, tech disruption everywhere, the sharing economy, potential money shifts.
Wow. And crucially, how they all connect and influence each other. It's not just separate trends.
Right. So the takeaway for you listening is maybe to reflect on how these forces might weave together in your own life, your industry, your decisions.
Which shore might you need to let go of, as Faulkner put it, to navigate what's coming?
And remember, this is just scratching the surface. There's so much more detail in the source material if you want to dig deeper into areas that affect you.
Definitely worth exploring further based on your interests.
So we'll leave you with this question to ponder. Given all these shifts we've talked about, what seemingly solid, stable part of our world today might actually be the most ripe for a really unexpected, dramatic transformation by 2030?